Michele Martell.
Thank you very much.
And David Wyatt.
Thank you. Hey, everybody. Yep. Oh, yeah. If I can operate at this. Nope. Did that already? There we go. All right. Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for being here. David Wyatt, Michele Martell. So the game that you just saw is Walkabout Mini Golf. Started out totally as a solo project by Lucas Martell, unrelated to Michele Martell, 4 years ago during the lockdown, and just kind of got carried away. So we're going to kind of tell you a little bit about that and talk mainly about kind of the non-dev parts of making a game, which is getting it out there and retaining ownership of it, and kind of like really making sure that what you make doesn't live and die with the game, but can go on and keep kind of serving you and your creative and business interests ongoing. Lucas made the game by himself and put out the first 4 courses more or less on his own, and then started bringing different people onto the team, and we're now at 35 people, which has been a pretty extraordinary journey. We're totally independent, no investors, no sort of other interest. The players pay the way. They support what we do. They buy the courses. There's no kind of data selling or microtransactions. We're just putting out an honest product on a reliable basis. Every 6 to 7 weeks, we put out a new course, and they enjoy it and buy it and kind of pay the way. So that's a real special place to be, and something we are proud of and defend and talk about, because normally what happens in the gaming world is you sort of hustle and do an indie thing until you can like make it big, do a big moonshot, and get investors, sell it out, and we're just trying to sort of make a living, which is a different sort of model.
So rare. Bizarre.
Yeah, but I think it's sort of worth talking about that a little bit. And so today we just put out our 29th course. The game is on all the VR platforms, and we just launched an iOS version, so you can fully cross-play on different VR headsets and the phone version as well. It's popular not only because it's approachable, because it's mini golf and everyone sort of understands mini golf, and you can take it seriously, or you can just sort of be goofy with it, but also because people like to play with each other and be kind of there with each other and explore. Is anything kind of big I'm missing in kind of the whole of what Walkabout is?
Story?
Yeah, I'm doing origin story.
Okay, got it. No, carry on.
Yeah, so those are the main things. And I think the reason why we wanted to do this talk is we wanted to just give a little bit of discussion time to so much of the work we've put into the game is not just the game. It's like really building out the player's relationship to what the game is. They'll only be playing the game, X number of hours a day or a week or something like that, and we don't want them obsessively playing other hours, but we want them to be able to celebrate that or remember the times that they had in the game outside. So we've made things like podcast series, YouTube shows, merchandise, partnerships, ways they can sort of celebrate and enjoy and discover the game.
Can I jump in?
Yeah, please.
Let me frame that. So
Yep.
Part of all of this is thinking about your product not only as a product, but thinking about the brand, right? So I worked in Hollywood for a long time, worked for the Muppets, worked for the WWE, worked for all these various people in the entertainment space, and then came to Austin and got to work with Mighty Coconut and Walkabout. And one of the main things I think that, like he says, the non-dev side is there's all the part where you have to make a good game, right? The game has to be good, there has to be value in that. And then there's the other side of it. And so a big part of kind of what we think about doing is how are you creating other opportunities for your fan base and interested parties to engage, right? And I can, the old-fashioned word of transmedia, but thinking about how you're creating lots of portals so people who are interested can find a way to engage. And so I think early on in the Walkabout process, Lucas was creating kind of these generic courses, and Meta came to him and said, you should really license other IP so you have more of a profile. And so he came to me, because we had done some work in the past, and he said, you do this, right? You know about this. So we started out to do licensing. So of the 29 courses, So far, I think only 4 of them are licensed. And so if you kind of think about like a tent pole, the big licensing ones come in there. But those are all part of the same thing, which for creators, really what you have to be thinking about is how are you creating a brand in addition to a product? And how are you protecting and managing and kind of growing your intellectual property, right? So just, so we do license deals with partners, and so that's a very, specific thing. How do you go to somebody and say, hey, let me borrow your brand for my thing, use your brand halo so people pay attention to my thing, and that's a whole structure. But then as Walkabout and Mighty Coconut do their own thing, we talk a lot about how are we creating intellectual property, right? So if you've played the game, there are series within the game. They just released 8-bit layer, which is part of the series of the evil villains, right? So even within the courses, they're thinking about how are we creating brands, right? That if you imagine there's the graphic novel series, you could see how there's other stuff that starts to come out of the game, thinking about how to create merch so that people can, sort of share their fandom and really do it in a way that allows the brand to grow, but without taking a bunch of risk, right? Because there isn't a big, deep-pocketed billionaire who's financing this. And so it's this really interesting process of this game and this lifestyle that started organically in Austin that is now played worldwide by lots of people. And so it's very Austin, right? That's the kind of success story of like, you can just be a garage band and it can be a real thing. And then as you're doing that, along the way, you're thinking about how are you owning and protecting your shit, right? So everything from trademarks, copyright, patenting if you've invented new things. But in a way, it's kind of taking yourself seriously even when you're starting out and small and you're thinking about, I'm not going to infringe on other people's IP and I'm going to check that I can use that. And because you want in success to have that foundation.
Absolutely. I guess we're kind of interviewing one another.
Oh, yeah. We practiced. We rehearsed this. Yeah, that's good.
So, what are some of the big, we talked a little bit about ownership, and you touched already on trademarking and making sure you're not infringed. There's basic, and there's a lot of tools that are just available for free. We can just kind of go and verify that someone else isn't using a name for a character that you're making, or a game, or a course, or something like that. But what are some of the big legal risks for devs as they get started?
I think a lot of it is this, you kind of want to access materials that are available, right? I want to use generative AI. I want to take this image from the internet. I want to use this thing. And part of it is you're thinking about, can you own that? Can you legitimately own that? If you found a distributor, could you say in the contract, this is original and I have all of the rights? So you're really thinking about that. Super brief on generative AI, because we could talk for millions of hours on that. I have a friend who just did a presentation at the University of Texas, and his presentation deck was 208 slides talking about generative AI. But the short bit on generative AI right now is you can't know that you can own the output that you've gotten from a LLM because there's huge issues around the legality of what it is that they scrape to put in it. And so that's just the basic thing is, so informal policies or formal policies you might do, let's use generative AI to brainstorm, create the mood board, and then go over here and build it ourselves. So that's super high level baseline generative AI. The other thing that I like to tell people about is copyright registration, because you legally have a copyright in anything you create the moment you create it, the moment it's affixed in a permanent expression. But if you register your copyright, which is very DIY-able and pretty inexpensive, I want to say it's $45 or something, copyright registration gives you 2 magic things. If somebody infringes your copyright, you have statutory damages, meaning you don't have to prove that their infringement cost you this $1 million contract. You're just like, $30,000 statutory damages, pay up, and pay my lawyer's fees. So in the universe, so you see this, right? So if somebody's infringed, you send a little letter that says, hey, statutory damages, pay my lawyer's fees, we're gonna settle for this amount of money, and then you move quickly. So I really like people to look into copyright registration because it's very approachable by non-lawyers, and you can really kind of just register stuff. So that's kind of protecting your IP. And then the big concern that we always have is making sure we're not inadvertently infringing anybody else's. So the 8-bit layer that just came out, set in the 80s, sort of lots of iconic products and images in the 80s, and we had to go through and make it not so iconic. Don't make it look like an Atari, because we don't have permission for that, right? And so we're on the Mighty Coconut side always trying to make sure that we're not stepping on other people's rights because they're a creator.
Yeah, indeed. I think that another thing that I see a lot, and coming from like bands, is my creative background, is that there's a lot of just sort of like favors and kind of informal handshake agreements or understandings that happen when you're just trying to kind of get it together. So what are some of the things to know and risks around contracting others, when other people are helping you make your thing? How do you retain ownership, treat them fairly, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so this is David, because I've trained him over the last few years, which is, even if it's just kind of having a document, if you're doing something with somebody else, you want to say out loud what it is you're doing. Hey, I'm going to create 5 of these for $10 by Wednesday, and then you're going to pay me $10. And then the person goes, no, I actually thought you were going to give it to me on Tuesday, and I'm only going to pay you $9. But because we put it in writing, the other person can respond. So a big thing is not feeling like there's some magical contract that you have to be a lawyer to do, is really just focusing on understanding what it is the agreement is. And for developers, it's really like code. If this, then that. So if I'm supposed to deliver this thing, but I don't deliver the thing, what happens? What does delivery look like? When is it sufficient? You know what I mean? Like, so you just want to think through what are kind of all the variables, and then you want to put it in writing. And there are definitely parts of a contract, where there's sort of lawyer magic words, work for hire and force majeure and all kinds of stuff. But the baseline is just, as you start to do things with other people, the minute it's not just you want to have some sort of document in place that says, we agree we're going to do it this way, and then you have something to build on. So that's a super good practice to have, is to, make it not informal. Sometimes people really vibrate around that, right? Like, this is my friend, this is my partner, this is something, and it is actually doing them a favor to have clarity, right? And so working through, like, hey, I wrote this down, do you agree? When I say yellow, do you agree yellow? Is really beautiful, because then you're doing that work and you're kind of working out that process. So I think kind of just writing stuff down is the key.
What about ownership? So like, if you work out an agreement with a buddy to do the soundtrack for your game, who owns that soundtrack? You or the buddy? Like, what are those sort of things around when you other people add into your IP? What is your advice there?
I'm going to not talk about it in the music context, because music is weird.
Yeah,
right?
okay,
Composer
sure.
rights, songwriter rights, publishing rights, and mechanical rights, and it's like
there's
a whole bunch of
a
stuff,
lot
right?
there, right?
But generally, you want to think about, do we own this jointly? Do we share the copyright? Or can we set it up where maybe I own it, but you get a piece of the profit, right? It's very Hollywood. Warner Brothers doesn't share ownership in the movie, but they'll give somebody a percentage of the profits, right? So, because ownership is tricky, right? And especially 50-50, and who wins and what happens. And again, if this, then that. If somebody wants to sell it and the other person doesn't, and you have 50-50, what do you do then, right? So giving away ownership is tricky, because you have obligations then to the other side. It's easier to say, if they're in success, you would get to participate.
And I know we got to kind of move on to some other topics, but one other thing, that a story of yours that I always enjoy hearing about, is like the idea of the IP being sort of more long-lasting than the game itself. And you talk about Jim Henson, and sort of like how the Jim Henson studio was able to sort of like vamp or tread water for a while after he died. But the idea that like you make the game, you think that's just it, but really the IP is bigger, because it can manifest other things, other games. It can go on and on in the future. And so what are your sort of advice points on how to kind of think that way, operate that way?
No, I think that's really it, right? Is, maybe your idea is getting expressed right now as a game, but you understand, right, from all the things that you're a fan of, that it could equally be a book or a song or a live stage performance or a podcast or whatever. And that's part of making sure you have your intellectual property foundation, is that it could be lots of different things. And I think one of the things I think about it as like that divining rod, right? And you're just sort of figuring out, like, where is the energy? Is it easier to build an indie game than it is to create a graphic novel? Depends on who you are and what you have access to. And so just this idea that it's not a product, you're creating a brand, and you're creating lots of different opportunity for people to be fans and come into it. And so, as David mentions, I worked at the Jim Henson Company, which was really kind of where I got to come out from behind the desk as a lawyer and get involved in the creative side and the patenting the robotic puppeteering technology and stuff. But really seeing that you could have something that has gone on for now, I think, close to 60 or 70 years, of one guy's creativity, then kind of built a team of other creative community makers. And then I think what I see in Mighty Coconut and Walkabout and other stuff where you can tell that it resonates with people, right? That it has emotional truth to it, and that's why people respond. There's something real and valid there. And I think you find that real and valid thing, and then you think about how do you make it available to people in other ways, right? And so that's kind of, as we look at Walkabout, and it on the surface is a mini golf game, but then it serves as family connection or meditation time, or it does all this other stuff. And we see play patterns coming out of Walkabout, right? So now the avatar packs are more of a thing because people want to cosplay. They want to dress up in weird shit and make their friends laugh and have a good time. You can fly in the game, and so now here's a play pattern that isn't about mini golf, it's about flying. So kind of letting people organically expand from the true thing at the center of it, right? And that's the key, is can you make something that hits people that has that?
Yep, definitely. Well, this is kind of a point, not so much of a question, but in terms of when you want to lock your shit down and copyright it, it's like as early as possible, but kind of never too late, right? And so you really want to get ahead of that as much as possible. Start now, whatever point you're in. If you launched your game a year ago, or you're not launching it for another 5 years or whatever, like start now on trying to own it. And do you have any kind of thoughts on?
No, but I'm gonna steal your line. Start now, but it's never too late,
yeah.
Right? And you do what you can do. You're like, if I have the money and the time, mind share to do one copyright registration, then do that, right? So really kind of the thing is just to start doing reps, like figure out ways to I'm gonna write a contract. I'm gonna start to play in this space. I'm gonna watch a Copyright Office video about how to file, so.
Yeah, and so much about developing your own game is like doing 12 dozen sub-disciplines and doing them well and sort of doing them all the time. We've heard throughout the day about balance and self-care, and all that stuff is important. But what I would say is, echoing that, just do what you can when you can. So like, get the URLs, get all of them, get .org and .com and .net, get all the social handles, even ones that you're not going to use right away. Just like lock that shit down, have it, put it away for another day when you sort of might need it, because it's a lot easier to do it before you put it out there in the world than later on to kind of catch up to it or find someone else that has grabbed that.
Yeah, and a great resource is an organization called TALA, Texas Accountants and Lawyers for the Arts. And you can, email in and ask for help on a specific project. I want to form a company. I want to trademark my name. I want to hire a musician. And then they hook you up with lawyers and accountants who will help you on a pro bono basis. So there is a really robust way to just kind of get project help immediately. So kind of the main thing being ask around, ask people, educate yourself, ask for resources. If you feel like I can't afford a lawyer, still do lawyery things. Right?
Yep, absolutely.
All right, now do I get to interview you?
Yeah, totally.
All right, good. I'm gonna take over. So David, so one of the things that's really, I think, magical and powerful about Walkabout is the way in which it has built a community without a big ad spend. And clearly you guys spend a lot of time and energy enhancing that community and supporting them, but would you say there's a couple main things that have helped that community grow?
Yeah, I think part of it is just what the game is and what kind of players it attracts, which is like there's this human connection piece, there's this sense of innocence and imagination and curiosity that happens there. But also part of it is that we don't have the ad dollars to spend, so normally a studio would just sort of like throw a lot of money at like big conference booths and activations and digital targeted ads, and since we're not venture capital funded, we're not doing that. But also I think it's part of my personal outlook, which is like human stories matter more. People, you can advertise the what and the how and the when and all that kind of stuff, but the why is the thing that actually gets people coming back to it over and over again. And so I think if you leave a gaming community unchecked, it's like the loud people and the winners who rise up to the top. They kind of like matter, like when you go into high school and you walk in and there's like the football trophies. You're like, I guess being the quarterback is what matters around here. I'm not that, so I guess that just don't matter. I'm the art kid, right? So we, like early on, we made a point not to like move those people aside, but just say they matter no more than the two sisters who reconnected in mini golf and like found their joy again. Like that really matters. That's important here. And so we've tried to like take those stories that rise up organically and really tell them, like put them on social media, make videos about them, pitch them to news outlets, and really kind of celebrate those things. And also to just tell people that, tell them and show them that being good to each other and teaching and kind of like watching out for the quietest players or the beginning players. That matters too. That's the kind of behavior that sort of makes you important around the game as well. So that storytelling is something we try to model and just kind of live every single day, so that people understand that the game is the community, how they bring it to life. We treat it a lot more like a place than like a game. In that early on, before it was kind of moving into live services territory, we just sort of a lot of our communication energy was about like the pretend things that were happening around there, the teenagers that were running the shack, and the grumpy manager that was behind the scenes, making rules. Then as we've gotten into more and more features and activities, we try to just bring the ones out that kind of, bring it to life in this sort of way.
I was going to say, the social media voice is sort of Walkabout Mini Golf is a place you could go to.
Yeah.
And there's, like thunder and lightning warnings, everybody get out of the pool kind of vibe to it, right? Where it's just very, you're not saying, buy the new game.
Right.
At Walkabout, you're like, oh, there's a new course, but it's sort of in this conceit that it's a place.
Yeah, definitely. I think, like community management is something I've had to learn on the job. I hadn't done that prior to this job. But really, if you take care of the players, they'll take care of the marketing, right? They'll go turn and tell people they love and care about the game and bring them in.
I'm gonna clarify or actually expand on that. Is the game itself enables sharing, right? So if I have the game and you have the game, but I have the new 8-bit layer, I can invite you to play with me, and you don't have to have the DLC. So it builds in community building. I could invite up to 7 people to play on my $3.99 DLC, right? So in a way, all of these sort of organic word-of-mouth things are also really supported by the game itself, right? The game itself is saying, share it with your friends and do this thing, and quick match and private rooms and all that stuff sort of enable that.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, and I think that's another thing is, as your collective or studio or team that's making your game gets larger, you need to make sure that everyone understands that community and the brand and communications aren't just something that is done after you make the game, that it's actually part of how you develop the game, and how you understand how the game is actually doing. Like what I noticed really early on is that a lot of the devs just paid attention to the beta testers. The beta testers are people that get it, and they're serious, and they know how to talk code or whatever. And so it's like, the serious players are like, no. Those are people that have self-selected to test, and they're important. But there's not that many players like that out there playing the game. There's a whole lot of people that don't play any other games or don't know the terms, or they're grandpas or sort of whatever it is. And so you have to really do a job of like bringing all that information in and being like, this is how it's being played, and this is how it's being played, and this is how it's being played, and really, really expose that internally so people aren't making the game in a vacuum. Like, I think that this is what a lot of people make games for other devs or for each other versus like actual people out there. And I think you really have to work hard at understanding how people are actually experiencing the game and what they talk about, what they know about, what they understand, all that kind of stuff.
So I just finished this book called Play Nice, which is about Blizzard. And one of the things I think about, though, is that sort of traditional video games is very, kind of first-person shooter and, that and competitive and winning and scores and stats, and casual games are kind of the unwanted child over on the side. And so what's really interesting is that Walkabout and this category, is casual the right name, or the Zen games, like Meta calls it or something? Cozy games. And this idea of the casual player. And I'm totally that demographic. I put on the headset, I play Walkabout, and I take it off, and I don't play any other games or do any other things. And so, in a way, the game itself has made space for people who are largely not serviced by the traditional video game industry. And then some of the fun things for Mighty Coconut is when you see traditional game people be all like, I love Walkabout Mini Golf.
Yeah, for sure.
The Call of Duty guys are like, we love Walkabout.
Yeah. So I think we're like close to time, so I want to respect the flow of the day. I mean, a couple things I didn't get to, but you all can snap a photo and approach us later for questions. We put our emails up earlier. PR, so working with bloggers and journalists and content creators, super important. Develop those relationships, read those outlets, set up Google alerts, be familiar with what they cover, how they cover it, which reporters or bloggers or content creators are doing things. There's no special access. You just find their contact information, DM them, keep them updated with the progress of your game so they can cover it when it comes out. Publishing is definitely something you have to kind of get schooled on, whatever platform you're on. You need to understand that there are promotional tools there that you need to take advantage of. And I think my big sort of closing idea is that you hear the term like shameless self-promotion. There's no shame in self-promotion. Like, in order to make your game viable, artistically, creatively, to lead to the next thing, if you want to make a living with it, if you hope to make a living with it, you got to promote it. Just like you have to pay taxes and pay your internet bill, like you gotta do self-promotion. And so if it's not your thing, learn a little bit of it, partner with someone that can do it. It's so important to get the word out there consistently and talk about it, because people, I think as a creator, it's easy to get your head and be like, it doesn't matter what I made. People don't care. I guess it didn't take. It's like people are just in their own head, right? They're out there contending with the world and their own mental stuff, and so it's your job to really just make sure that they can remember it. So pepper something in every few days about your process, about stories that you hear from your players, about the tech behind the game. Talk about that stuff as a way to kind of like live journal your process to the world, but that's how you engage people and bring them along and make them remember and understand why they should care, why they might be a part of what you're doing. It's really, really important part of what.
And I'm going to say
you
that,
do.
like, giving people an opportunity to care, right? And like, so even reading this book about Blizzard, and at various points, and fans are mad, right, because people are invested in something. And so I love that as like a baseline thought, right? Like, you make it open for people to invest themselves, because that's really what they're doing when they buy into a brand or an IP. They're like, this is now self, right? And I want to identify myself with that. So I love that. So opening for caring. Are you good with words? Is this like a word guy?
Yeah. I do words sometimes. So I think we're back with Kobe.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, let's hear it for Mighty Coconut, Walkabout Mini Golf, and owning and promoting your shit. And yeah, super important, promote yourself. Make sure people know about you and your game. And now it's time. Closing remarks. We're gonna